You are sleepwalking through a burning house, completely oblivious to the matches being struck right under your feet, clutching your depreciating fiat currency while the architects of the New World Order are actively measuring your coffin. Welcome back to the Awakened Seal. Look closely at the image before you, this terrifying visualization of Israel glowing like a radioactive bullseye on the geopolitical map, surrounded by the hypersonic delivery systems of an incoming paradigm shift. Because this is not just another regional skirmish or a manufactured news cycle meant to distract you. This is the catastrophic unraveling of the post-World War II geopolitical consensus, a localized detonation with a global blast radius that is meticulously designed to evaporate your retirement accounts, sever your supply chains, and completely shatter your comfortable illusion of safety. The ancient texts, specifically the profound and often misunderstood Book of Daniel, were never intended to be consumed as mere mythological fairy tales for ancient shepherds. Rather, they were encoded, hyper-accurate geopolitical blueprints detailing the exact collision of empires and the deliberate restructuring of global power that we are witnessing unfold in real time today. When the desperate warning echoes to stay home if you ever see this prophecy happening, it is not merely a physical instruction to lock your deadbolts and hide under your bed. It is a profound psychological and economic imperative, a desperate plea for you to mentally, spiritually, and financially decouple from a fragile, interconnected global system that is actively self-destructing by design. We are currently watching the terminal, agonizing decline of the petrodollar hegemony, an entirely artificial financial matrix where the world's reserve currency is backed by absolutely nothing except the implicit threat of overwhelming military violence and the mandatory pricing of Middle Eastern crude oil. And as the Middle East ignites into a prophesied inferno, that foundational pillar of Western economic dominance inevitably crumbles into dust. You foolishly believe that the inflation you are currently experiencing at the grocery store is a temporary aberration. But just wait until the strategic choke points like the Strait of Hormuz or the Suez Canal are completely barricaded by asymmetric warfare, choking off a massive critical percentage of the global energy supply, instantly sending the price of crude oil into the stratosphere and triggering a hyperinflationary spiral that will make the historical tragedy of the Weimar Republic look like a minor economic hiccup. The kings of the North and the South that Daniel so vividly warned humanity about are not mythical deities from a bygone era. They are the modern, nuclear-armed superpowers and their highly funded proxy states, ruthlessly moving their geopolitical chess pieces across the volatile board of the Levant, using sovereign nations as expendable pawns in a brutal, zero-sum game for absolute global dominance. The elite, the institutional investors, the apex predators of the financial ecosystem. They are not sitting on their couches waiting for the mainstream evening news to tell them what to think or how to react. They are already aggressively liquidating their vulnerabilities, moving massive amounts of capital out of the system, seeking refuge in hard assets, precious metals, decentralized ledgers, and tangible commodities that actually retain intrinsic value, while the oblivious masses remain hopelessly distracted by meticulously manufactured culture wars and the mindless, algorithmic dopamine loops of modern entertainment. You must understand that you are quite literally being farmed for your attention and your labor, constantly taxed through the invisible, insidious theft of monetary debasement by central banks, while the military-industrial complex salivates over the multi-billion-dollar, taxpayer-funded contracts guaranteed by every single missile that illuminates the night sky over the Iron Dome. This is the brutal, unforgiving law of cause and effect in its purest manifestation, the absolute karmic return of decades of central banking hubris, unrestrained money printing, and endless interventionist foreign policies finally coming home to roost in a spectacular display of geopolitical consequence. If you do not desperately seek to understand the macroeconomic machinery at play here, you will be mercilessly ground into dust by its heavy gears. The prophecy of Daniel speaks of a time of distress such as has not happened since the beginning of nations. And if you simply open your eyes and look at the astronomical, unpayable sovereign debt levels, the terrifyingly fragile derivative market bubbles hanging by a thread, and the escalating kinetic flashpoints across the globe, you must logically realize that the mathematics supporting this current societal architecture are entirely unsustainable. We are collectively staring down the barrel of a synchronized global recession, one that is deliberately engineered to consolidate power, resources, and wealth into the hands of an unelected technocratic elite who will predictably offer a new, digitized, heavily surveilled financial control system as the only viable solution to the horrifying chaos they themselves subtly orchestrated. It is the Hegelian dialectic operating in its purest, most malevolent form. Problem, reaction, solution, where they quietly fund the radical factions. They arm the opposing combatants. They create the horrific conditions depicted in that fiery thumbnail. And when the global populace is ultimately begging on their knees for relief from the engineered terror and economic starvation, the architects will graciously step forward to roll out the digital control grid. Daniel's ancient visions of terrifying beasts crushing the earth with iron teeth are the absolute perfect, chillingly accurate metaphorical representations of today's mega-corporations, transnational financial institutions, and supranational governing bodies that operate completely outside the bounds of democratic oversight, aggressively consuming the resources of the working class and trampling human sovereignty underfoot without a second thought. When you see the armies gathering, when you see the rapid escalation of asymmetric warfare and the terrifying deployment of autonomous drones and hypersonic glide vehicles bypassing traditional defense systems, you are bearing witness to the abomination that causes desolation being systematically prepared for its devastating modern debut. Understand clearly that this prophesied desolation is not just about the physical destruction of buildings or infrastructure, it is about the complete and utter annihilation of your purchasing power, the systemic erasure of your individual autonomy, and the crushing of your human spirit under the weight of an inescapable technocratic serfdom. To genuinely stay home in the context of this unfolding reality means to actively build your personal ark, to rapidly localize your food and water supply, to harden both your physical and digital perimeters, and most importantly, to cultivate a sovereign, impenetrable mind that cannot be hijacked by the mainstream media's weaponized broadcasts of perpetual panic. The political establishment and their media lapdogs want you utterly terrified, emotionally reactive, and desperately begging for their state intervention. But true awakening requires the courage to look at this burning geopolitical chessboard with cold, calculating logic, fully comprehending that the chaos enveloping the Middle East is an integral component of a much larger, darker design. The entire architecture of modern Western society is built upon a fraudulent foundation of infinite debt and the assumption of endlessly cheap, accessible energy. And as the Middle East, the very geopolitical heartbeat of that global energy infrastructure, rapidly descends into a prophesied apocalyptic conflict, the resulting shockwaves will definitively shatter the fragile global supply chains, bringing the precarious, just-in-time delivery systems that keep your grocery store shelves stocked to a grinding, permanent halt. You have to strip away your normalcy bias right now and realize that the comfortable, predictable era you grew up in is dead and buried, replaced by a ruthless era of resource scarcity, currency wars, and kinetic conflicts that fulfill the ancient warnings to the letter. Look at the strategic positioning of the BRICS nations, quietly but methodically building an alternative financial infrastructure, hoarding thousands of tons of physical gold, and preparing to permanently circumvent the dollar-dominated SWIFT system, knowing full well that whoever controls the energy and the hard assets will dictate the terms of the next global epoch. The events unfolding in Israel and the surrounding nations are the undeniable catalyst for this massive wealth transfer and global power shift, a literal spark in the powder keg of international relations that forces every nation to choose a side in a deeply polarized, fractured new world. Daniel warned us of a final empire, a kingdom divided, partly strong like iron and partly fragile like clay, an exact mirror of our current globalistic alliance system, outwardly projecting immense technological and military power but internally rotting from deep ideological division, unsustainable debt, and the total erosion of fundamental moral principles. This is the terrifying reality you must face, the stark truth that the institutions you trusted to protect you are the very entities driving the bus over the cliff, completely indifferent to the collateral damage of the middle class as long as their absolute power is preserved and expanded in the aftermath of the crash. You cannot vote your way out of a mathematical certainty. You cannot protest your way out of a currency collapse. And you certainly cannot ignore your way out of a geopolitical firestorm that threatens the very core of global stability, which is exactly why the instruction to stay home is paramount. It is an instruction to stop relying on external saviors, to withdraw your energy, your capital, and your attention from the corrupt systems that enslave you, and to urgently become the master of your own localized reality before the global storm makes landfall. The prophecies are not meant to paralyze you with fear, they are meant to arm you with foresight, to provide you with the ultimate insider information regarding the fate of nations so that you can navigate the treacherous waters ahead with the clarity and resolve of someone who already knows exactly how the game ends. If you are still heavily invested in the traditional markets, if you still trust fiat currency as a store of value, if you still believe the political theater presented to you on a screen, you are standing on the tracks with your back turned to an accelerating freight train. We are entering the crucible, the refining fire that will ruthlessly strip away the illusions of the modern age and expose the raw, brutal truth of survival, power, and the inescapable consequences of humanity's collective choices. The time for complacency has officially expired. The window for preparation is slamming shut, and the shadows of Daniel's visions are now manifesting as undeniable, terrifying realities on the nightly news, demanding that you make a choice between willful ignorance and harsh, uncompromising awakening. But the true terror, the absolute masterstroke of this entire geopolitical machination, is not just what they are doing to the physical world, but what they are preparing to do to the minds of those who survive the initial shockwave, because the elite know that controlling the narrative of the collapse is even more critical than the collapse itself, and what they have planned for the desperate, starving populations in the aftermath of this Middle Eastern ignition will make you wish the bombs had just fallen instead. Are you ready to dive into the darkest, most terrifying aspect of the elite's endgame and uncover the psychological prison they are building behind the smoke of the battlefield? Welcome to the terrifying second half of this equation, where the kinetic warfare you are watching on your screens is merely a brutal distraction from the silent, digital enslavement being constructed right underneath your feet. The architects of this engineered collapse do not just want your land or your resources, they want absolute algorithmic ownership of your mind and your future, utilizing the prophesied chaos of the Middle East as the ultimate smokescreen to usher in a technocratic panopticon that will make historical tyrannies look like an absolute joke. As the petrodollar hegemony burns to ash in the Levant, they are meticulously preparing to roll out central bank digital currencies, a programmable, heavily surveilled financial matrix designed to totally eradicate your economic autonomy and tether your ability to buy basic necessities directly to your unquestioning obedience to the state. You are being systematically herded into a digital slaughterhouse, willingly trading your biometric data and your privacy for the fleeting convenience of a smartphone application, completely blind to the fact that you are voluntarily building the bars of your own inescapable digital cage. The year 2026 is not just a random date on a calendar. It is a mathematically and prophetically targeted convergence point, a rapidly approaching singularity where the stark warnings of ancient texts and the chilling macroeconomic cycles perfectly align to shatter the global financial architecture once and for all. Look at the aggressive consolidation of power, the deliberate destruction of independent supply chains, and the strategic hoarding of physical gold by Eastern superpowers. They are all preparing for the imminent catastrophic death of the fiat currency system while you are still being distracted by mindless political theater and algorithmic dopamine loops. The instruction from Daniel to stay home is not a call for cowardly isolation. It is an urgent, screaming mandate to aggressively decouple your life from a fragile, hyper-connected grid that is explicitly designed to weaponize your dependence during the coming crisis. They are starving the agricultural sector under the guise of environmentalism to ensure that when the global logistics networks inevitably freeze, a desperate, starving populace will literally beg for the synthetic, lab-grown rations distributed by the very technocrats who engineered the famine in the first place. You have to violently snap out of your normalcy bias right now and realize that the comfortable illusion of infinite growth is mathematically dead, replaced by a ruthless era of resource scarcity and localized survival, where only the psychologically impenetrable will weather the storm. Every single piece of paper money you hold is a toxic debt instrument actively melting in purchasing power, a silent theft orchestrated by central banks that desperately need the geopolitical firestorm in Israel to mask their decades of criminal monetary policy and uncontrollable money printing. If you do not immediately begin converting your evaporating wealth into hard, tangible assets, if you do not fiercely localize your food and water security, and if you do not build a localized network of highly capable, awake individuals, you will be effortlessly swept away by the brutal tidal wave of this economic reset. The artificial intelligence grids they are deploying are not here to cure diseases or make your life easier. They are highly advanced, predictive psychological weapons designed to completely map human behavior, anticipate your descent, and neutralize your sovereignty before you even realize you are under attack. We are entering the crucible of the New World Order, a dark, unforgiving transition where the veil of democratic illusion is being violently ripped away to reveal a cold, heavily armed oligarchy that views you as nothing more than a highly manageable data point in a centralized ledger. Stop relying on external saviors. Stop trusting the deeply compromised legacy media that constantly lies to you to manufacture your consent for endless wars, and start taking absolute, terrifying responsibility for your own physical and spiritual survival. The prophecies are manifesting with brutal, undeniable precision. The kings of the earth are making their final moves on the geopolitical chessboard, and the window to prepare your personal ark before the deluge of 2026 drowns the unprepared is slamming shut right before your eyes. You must become a master of your own reality, a hardened, unyielding force of nature that cannot be panicked by their weaponized narratives or starved into submission by their digital control grids, standing absolutely sovereign and deeply rooted as the fragile, corrupt systems of the old world are permanently and violently burned away.